The question is, I will summarize it. One brother actually emailed me that, Shaykh, I'm born in the Hanafi madhab, but I don't know what the Hanafi madhab is. Just my parents told me I'm Hanafi, and I don't have the resources or the knowledge to study the madhab. What should I do? Should I just follow any shaykh or ask any shaykh, or should I try to stick to the madhab? What should I do? So this is a very deep question. It's the question of the madhabs. And inshallah, one day we'll give much longer lectures about the history of the madhab and whatnot. In a nutshell, a madhab is a human attempt to arrive at the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the attempt by great ulama, by people whose names you have heard, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and more imams. There were more than 4 madhabs. There were over 40 madhabs at one point in time. These were efforts by great scholars to try to codify the sharia, to try to make it structured, to try to put parameters. And over time, certain madhabs flourished, other madhabs, they dwindled out. And as we all know, currently there are typically 4 large Sunni madhabs, but there are smaller madhabs as well. And there's also recently a movement to basically not follow any of the madhabs and go back directly to the Quran and Sunnah. And the reality is that the people who want to go back directly to the Quran and Sunnah, it's a good slogan, but in reality, the madhabs themselves are attempting to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. It's not as if the madhabs are not going back to the Quran and Sunnah. And what happens when you say we're not going to follow the madhabs, we're going to try to go back directly, you actually end up creating another madhab as well. So not much is accomplished. So my philosophy is as follows, that we need to understand that the vast majority of questions that anybody asks any shaykh cannot be answered by opening up a book of hadith and just getting it from there. It doesn't work that way. Rather, what the madhab does, it is a set of parameters. In English we call it a paradigm. In Arabic we say usul. It is a set of parameters. How do you approach the texts? What do you do when the texts appear to conflict with one another? How do you interpret the same text? This is what the madhab does. You cannot simply open up a book of hadith and derive Islamic law. Even the most basic questions of Islamic law, you need some type of systematic framework. I will give you simple examples when it comes to doing wudu. Doing wudu, simple example. Must you do wudu in the order of the verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah that Allah says in the Quran, "O you who believe, when it is time to pray, basically stand up, you wash your face and your hands, and you wipe your head, and then you wash your feet." This is in the Quran, 4 things are mentioned, right? Simple question. What if you accidentally miss up and you do number 3, instead of number 3, you do it number 2. You wash the feet instead of wiping the hands and you flip it around. Is your wudu valid or not? Which hadith are you going to go to invalidate or to validate? You will not find any. So within the madhabs, you will find 2 madhabs that say, oh, you must follow the same tartib because Allah said it, so we must follow it. And 2 madhabs say, well, this tartib is sunnah. Tartib means order. This tartib is sunnah, but it's not wajib. If my mother says to me that, son, if you can, warm the dinner and make some chai for me. What if I made the chai and warmed the dinner? I've done the job. I've done what she asked me. So I've done what Allah said, even if I flip it around. How will you solve this question? There is no easy answer. That's where the madhab comes in. Another simple question of wudu. Allah says do wudu in these 4 things, right? What if you delay and you make some time frame? You're doing wudu and your cell phone rings and your feet were not washed. You answer the cell phone, you walk around 20 minutes, mashallah, tabarakallah, talking to somebody. Now you come back. What do? Can you continue from where you left off? This is called muwala. Or must you go back to the beginning? I challenge you to find any hadith, you will not find it. This is where the madhab comes in. It is a framework, it is an usul, it is a paradigm. And therefore, the default historically for the last 14.5 centuries, the bulk of the ummah has followed a systematic methodology, call it a madhab. It makes life easier. However, in my humble opinion, it is not wajib, because wajib is a big term. Wajib means Allah requires you to follow. Wajib wajib means it is an obligation. That's a big thing. It is not wajib to follow a madhab, but it makes sense, it makes life easier, and this is the historical norm that people typically follow a madhab. As for the movements recently that are attempting to basically reject the madhabs and go back, as I said, if you understand what is going on, what they have done is essentially create another madhab other than those four, and there are issues and pros and cons over there. The bottom line, in my humble opinion, when it comes to this issue, you have one of two options, and you may choose any one of them. Either stick with your madhab and no problem, and inshallah, if you come to me and you say, what is the Hanafi position? If I don't know it, I will look it up and tell you, and that's fine, no problem. Or it is allowed to ask a learned person and get the answer from the learned person without wondering which madhab is there, because Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So if an issue comes up and you don't know, and you ask a shaykh, and then 3 days later another issue comes, you ask another respected shaykh, no problem, that is also allowed, because in the end of the day, even if somebody were to tell you it's the Hanafi madhab, you have no way to ascertain it anyway. You are following a learned authority. The example I give that is inshallah understandable, I am not a medical doctor, right? It is not my area of expertise. Now, what do I do when I have a medical issue? I go to the expert. And how do I know the expert is the expert? Well, the perception, the degrees, the credibility, people know. So there is something called PR. There is something called credibility. There's something called, the certificates, education. It's something that is known. Scholarship is known. So I go to the doctor and I say, okay, these are my problems. What is your prescription? Once the doctor prescribes it, am I in a position to question the doctor? Where'd you get that from? What's your evidence? I did not go to medical school. I cannot do that. Now, suppose another doctor who is a more specialist than the first one says, but actually this is my area. You went to a general practitioner. Now you have what you need is a pulmonologist. I'm a pulmonologist. Now perhaps I may follow the more learned doctor. But what is not allowed is fatwa shopping for the easiest fatwa. Why? The example would be, I go to 10 doctors and I choose the prescription simply because it's the cheapest prescription. Who does that? Nobody. My life is too precious that I don't care if the prescription is $10 or $1. I want to go to the best doctor. That's what I do. So when it comes to the shaykh, when it comes to Islam, your Islam is more precious than your life. You may ask a second opinion if the second shaykh you feel is more qualified, no problem. But you should not go fatwa shopping for the best bargain, because your religion is too precious to do that. And you are not qualified to pick and choose based upon ease and convenience. This is what pretty much unanimously our scholars have said. Do not go and ask 10 scholars to then simply choose the easiest position. That does not make sense. Either stick with the madhab, and that's fine, and that's healthy. Or when a situation arises, ask a shaykh, and the shaykh is qualified, and you may follow the shaykh, no problem. Either of these are allowed, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best.